So I'd like to welcome y'all to the Life After Sales podcast. I'm your host, Ding Zhang, otherwise known as the Sales Rapper. You can catch me on LinkedIn, content creating. It's the first time doing one of these intros, but I'm just gonna let it rock because as you're listening to this podcast at home in the comfort of your favorite DSP, this is also being simultaneously broadcast live on Clubhouse, where I have a lovely audience of 14 people in this room. One of my commitments for 2022 is to do a little bit more video type content. So what that means is like this test episode here, we're gonna be pushing video on YouTube, chopping up some great highlight content, much like Joe Rogan does for you lovely folks on LinkedIn. And yeah, a lot of platforms today. We're on Clubhouse, we're on LinkedIn. Follow all the accounts, all of that. So what are we covering on this episode of Life After Sales? Well, first, let's answer the question, what is this podcast about and why it's being created? As many of you know, I started my career in music at a very young age, and through almost a decade of trial and tribulation, was not in a place where I can sustain that career. So in my junior year of college, I decided to quit doing music and pursue the lovely career path of sales. In other words, kind of fell into sales because I didn't get any consulting jobs, and sales was all that wanted to take me. I was a warm body and could hop on a phone. I actually prefer the music. I prefer the music. Shout out to Clubhouse Karaoke. Hey, Will Weinbach, bet you weren't expecting a shout out on my podcast, but here we are, 2022, brave new world. So as you can see, this is the tone that we're setting here with this episode. It's just me. Welcome. It's your boy Ding. Here we are. Here's lo-fi beats to study to, so I sound a little less creepy talking by myself to myself with my live studio audience, I might add. So we are here gathered today. It's the first pilot episode of Life After Sales because I am living my life after sales. Used to be an account executive over at a little old company called Yelp. You might have heard of it. Good reviews, haha. As I was saying earlier in my story, so I started making music in 2008 or so when I was very young, 12 years old, and it was at a time when YouTube was really coming up. So I was part of the first generation of people to be able to see as they were growing through their formative years, other people on the internet doing all kinds of stuff. And I think it was a huge advantage in that it gave me the confidence, hey, I see Joe Schmo, who's probably not much older than me, on YouTube with viral videos. You know, this was around the time of Justin Bieber first hit the scene. So I felt really empowered to make my content. And a lot of people ask me, hey Ding, how did you get started in music? Well, it was very simple. A lot of people overthink that almost. And I noticed that more with older folks, is that there used to be more of a barrier into starting something like that. But I think me being 25 today in 2022, and 12 years old at the time in 08, just seeing all these examples online, it didn't seem that far out of reach. So it was a pretty organic process. And then following that, I started creating just video content on YouTube, trying to be a YouTuber. So I did that for a long time and never really got the traction that made it worth it. So eventually I pivoted around the 2015, 2016 mark to chasing that SoundCloud rap clout. Ooh, SoundCloud. You ever heard of Lil Pump or Smoke Perp? That was the model at the time. Everyone wanted to be a SoundCloud rapper. I mumble rapped. You know, I hit those trap beats. I hit the auto-tune. Really strong departure from when I used to be a boom bap artist. And throughout that process was also coincided with me going to college. And I got exposed to a lot more, career side of things, professional, right? And I think there is that intense pressure when you're in school to, hey, what is the next step? Obviously, there's have fun, explore yourself, explore the world, but also, there's 4 years of this, and after this, it's kind of like, hey, kid gloves are off. So at that time, I did a lot of reflection on my own rap career. It was nearing the end of my junior year. Writing was on the wall, and I realized that music wasn't going to work out financially. So started applying to mad jobs senior year, a lot of consulting, studied a lot of case interviews, didn't get any offers. So, but there was one company that gave me a job offer. So I moved to New York from Boston, got a shitty little apartment in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, started working at Yelp as I believe it was associate account executive trainee, was what they called it. And then from then, my life completely changed. All right, so for our next 10-minute segment, we have a surprise guest, Chris Cheng in the house. Chris Cheng of Tech Talks on Clubhouse, as well as LeaseWeb. Shout out to LeaseWeb. I actually met LeaseWeb at SaaStr this past September in San Mateo. So shout out to the team at LeaseWeb. Shout out to my man, Chris. Thank you for coming on the show today. And this is the beauty of the modern use case here with Clubhouse live stream. In addition to a async recorded podcast, is we can have amazing people like Chris, relevant to the topic at hand, life after sales, can just pop in the room and here we are having a conversation. So Chris, how are you doing?
I mean, how am I doing? I'm in the sales grad right now, so it's not life after sales for me. So I mean,
it's life during sales. I feel you. And the funny thing is, I feel like a lot of the people listening to this podcast are going to be salespeople. So I think first of all, Chris, I want to explain to you kind of the what and why behind this podcast. So the reason I started this Life After Sales podcast is, as you know, I am a rapper and I run a B2B creative agency. But in the past, I was just a pure musician and content creator, and I gave that up when it wasn't working out to enter sales. So I am in a new arc of my career journey, so to speak, post-sales. And one thing I have noticed this past year, ever since I started this current venture, is I'll have conversations, because I still talk to a lot of salespeople, right? Like fantastic salespeople like Chris over here, is that they're always curious. Like, hey, what is life like after sales, right? Once you get the monkey off your back, you're not carrying the bag anymore. What does that look like? And what is the transfer of skills, right? Like what talents or abilities do we build in our sales tenures that translate towards entrepreneurship or marketing or any other of the many divergent paths that one can take after sales. And I know for Chris here, one reason I'm really excited to have Chris Cheng here is Chris is in sales. Q1 has started. We're in the grind of things, right? Trying to smash our 22 goals. But Chris also has really awesome projects like Tech Talks community on Clubhouse and other ventures that he's involved in. So Chris kind of has the perspective on both sides, which I'm excited about, because me currently not being in the hot seat, not being in sales, there is that bit of distance from that profession. So it's great to have a well-balanced mix of perspectives on this topic. But the reason that we made this podcast, Life After Sales, is to give all the salespeople out there that are, maybe they love their jobs, maybe they're feeling a bit stuck, maybe they're making great money, they're crushing their goals, but long term, there's that question in the back of their heads, hey, do I want to do this thing forever? And for some people it's yes, and for others it's no. So this podcast is for the latter group, right? Maybe you have your SDR that's 2 years in, haven't got that AE promotion. Hey, reevaluating the career. What are some other options, right? So myself as someone who made a pivot into marketing, right? Definitely want to highlight some of the things that helped me make that transition, some of the strengths and capabilities that you build in sales that can relate to other fields and other roles. And then as well, wanted to document the journey, right? As a first-time entrepreneur building an agency in the B2B space with a background in sales, and what my learnings are coming from the sales background. So hopefully others can learn from my mistakes and not have to go through some of the same pitfalls and experimentation. So that's the purpose of this podcast today. We have on Chris Cheng from LeaseWeb and Tech Talks.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I mean, the whole topic of like, life after sales or life during sales while also doing things that aren't sales related. I mean, it's definitely a trip, bro. I mean, the best way I could describe it is that, I mean, for those who haven't been in a sales role, I mean, like the best way easily I could describe it is it's the easiest job you can ever have, right? Or it's the hardest job you can ever have. And it's really solely dependent on you. I mean, if you aren't, necessarily at the level where you can take the risk or maybe the jump or have the idea or product or service to really get into entrepreneurship, I mean, sales is probably one of the best places where you could start off to, kind of get your feet wet without having the risk involved. You make the sales, you get a piece of the pie, you don't get the whole pie, you don't get to divvy it out to the team members, you just get your slice. And through those hardships of, prospecting, constantly trying to hit goals, going through some of the minutia of, different sales organizations, not the one that I'm currently at, not LeaseWeb, but, other sales organizations where, moving, goalposts happen, politics aside. I mean, there's just so many different things, and the profession itself, again, can be super easy. You can kind of slide your way through and kind of, try to make it quarter by quarter and milk the base salary, which, by the way, is not high compared to tech standards, right? If you're working in the tech industry, or you can actually like put in what I would say, unfortunately, at least from what I've experienced, is more than like your 9 to 5, right? And just go gung ho all sales, right? And then you're still making a bunch of pieces of that pie, and like, you're crushing your quota and stuff, and like, you can make a good amount of money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with sales, right? Like that's how a lot of people get their fortune, right? But when you're trying to leave sales, there are lots of pros where you can really incorporate all the things that you've learned through that journey. I mean, one thing I'll say is like for entrepreneurs, sales is definitely important. Like you could be the most technical person and, a product builder, but, ultimately having some kind of like persuasion or influence or being able to just communicate with people, ultimately, whether it's internal or external, is important. So sales, I think, is super important, not in the aspect of just selling, but just being able to communicate. Going into entrepreneurship, though, I would say like those are the best things. But the bad things is that you carry a lot of what I would say habits of a salesperson that necessarily aren't going to help get you to where you need to be from a scalability standpoint, because there are ways to sell without having to always be that, foot soldier, having to make the phone calls, having to, be the one that's directly sending emails, doing the follow-ups, going through the full process, negotiating, writing the proposal, building the proposal, creating the product on the back end, operations, and then closing that deal, right? I mean, there's so much involved, and I'll leave it at that there, so that we can have a little conversation about it. But definitely, I would say that it's waned on my mind, especially having that kind of duality split. It's kind of living like a dual life.
That's incredible, Chris. First of all, we just got our first audiogram snippet of the podcast with Chris dropping those gems on us. Oh wait, where's my? Yeah, we got a soundboard. It's a real podcast. Woo! But Chris, you made a great point about scalability, and to address, I think a great point that Chris made was the whole scalability element and the habits that one builds as a salesperson. So in late 2020, when I was first experimenting, figuring out the sales wrapper side of things, I fell heavily into that trap where the first thing I did was hit the phones and start sending emails and start outbounding. I'm like, hey, I'm a sales rep. This is what I'm good at, and I'll do it. And it did not set me up for success, because what I learned from that is you got to think like a marketer in some cases, especially with scalability. Because I think, and here's the other side of the benefits of being a sales rep for a company, is that you have the structure built for you, right? You have the sales playbook, the process, the tech stack, some extent of product market fit. You have the product figured out for you. And it's like entrepreneurship with training wheels. It's like, yes, you're responsible for your own success, but a lot of the other pieces are taken care of. Welcome back to the Life After Sales podcast. This is the fourth take. I've just lost half an hour on a failed YouTube stream, and also parts of the Chris interview didn't get completed. So unfortunately, we don't have Chris here. We're no longer live. I just want to take this last 10-minute segment due to the quick time technical difficulties to at least get something out. We stitch these together and have at least a pilot episode. So we're not perfect, but we're getting some content out there for y'all. And to continue the point I was making on the end of video 2 is the concept of sales and how it prepares you for the entrepreneur journey. And I touched on the point that sales as an individual contributor really builds out the whole structure and engine of the business, and you're an entrepreneur in that individual contributor setting where you're then able to determine your own success, right? Go out and sell, crush your number type of thing. So that mentality, it translates well to the entrepreneurship journey in the sense that you will hold yourself more accountable having been in sales. You know what it looks like to work hard, right? When you make 100 dials outbound in a day, and at the end of the day, you can't even formulate a sentence, that's hard work, right? So you have that metric, that benchmark to always push yourself to. Now, one of the pitfalls of the pivot from sales is that you're very used to the system and the structure around you, right? You have the playbook, you have the product market fit, you have the sales process. There is a product there for you to sell, right? But once you step out of that environment, suddenly you're thinking about all these other things, right? Or as your business grows, what about the marketing, right? The positioning in general, right? Strategic partnerships, product development, right? And then I'm not at that point yet, but eventually, management, right? Legal, finances, other pieces that are involved in the business. And one big piece that I think is important to sales, and luckily for me, I eventually pivoted towards more of the marketing side of the revenue game, is it is very important. One of the biggest mistakes I made early on was be too gung-ho about the sales experience and the sales process. One of the first things I did when I started out the salesrap.io was go outbound. But the mistake was I hadn't figured out my true value proposition. I haven't determined product market fit. I didn't understand the reasons why my buyers bought, what I was actually selling, the transformation I was selling, all these things, right? That you figure out when you take a more marketing focused approach. My early outbound attempts were pretty unsuccessful. Just a lot of the message didn't resonate. I was really trying to push it as jingles. I didn't understand how to present it as a driver of pipeline, as a pipeline accelerator, and I didn't have all the use cases and customer success stories that I do now. And that made it really hard to go and outbound at first, right? Didn't even have a website, no source or sense of credibility for my brand. And those are all huge issues that for a salesperson starting this game, you might not be thinking about immediately, but it's very important. You could be the best salesperson in the world, and if the business structure doesn't support you, all that's going to do is create more obstacles, make it harder for you to sell, face more rejection, and spend time in the wrong places. So in heading into 2021, one of my biggest priorities was to focus my efforts on marketing, learning that game, and driving inbound lead generation for myself. And ultimately, that's what allowed the business to survive and continue growing, throughout 2021 and into 22, was creating a brand for myself and create a brand for my clients, and having that demonstrated success and awareness on social media, in back channel conversations, That was the big needle mover for me. And what that did was not all of these leads that come in are going to be good fits, right? And that's your job as a salesperson, as the salesperson, to go in, actively disqualify, be genuinely curious, ask interview style discovery questions, because you're not only selling, you're figuring out what you're selling, why you're selling it, and how you're going to sell it. And it's through that customer interaction that you learn these insights. You can sit there and strategize and think all day, but until you go out into the market and test it, you're never going to know for sure. But a quick observation. I was talking to my friend earlier today, and we're both setting out on more frequent video type content journeys in 22. You know, the resolution, the big commitment. And my friend Eric Smith runs the Lowly SDR podcast, another former salesperson who I'm going to have on this show soon. It's easy for us salespeople to sit here on a podcast style content and be able to talk. I call this the Chael Sonnen content method, where you can sit here in one spot and wax poetic and talk about a lot of different things, a myriad of topics, without running out of steam. That is what sales can teach you. On the other hand, the conventional YouTuber strategy of, hey, let me sit here, write down my content plan, structure out my videos, I'm less good at that. So that is one commitment I'm making in 22, is to improve on that side of things. But here's the hack. If you're starting out trying to make content, start a podcast. And the reason why is you get one piece of long form content. In my case, with the technical difficulties, 3 pieces of 10-minute content. But then you could cut that into a long form, right? And create this podcast series, which, you know, my friend Nick Bennett, for example, with Rep Your Brand, shout out to Rep Your Brand. Now that's becoming a high value digital course about elevating your personal brand with insights from 20 or 30 of the top LinkedIn B2B marketers in this space, right? And that's one use case. Another use case, chop up your 30-minute, hour-long podcast into 3 small, short videos, or even audiograms with the text captions. And now you have 4 or 5 different videos from just half an hour of work. Well, and some time for the editor. Shout out to the editor. So this is good. This was a great test pilot first experience. Definitely ran into some technical difficulty, but with the live audience there on Clubhouse as well, doing this here for you podcast listeners, and a failed YouTube stream. Definitely a lot of learnings. And here's one thing is you could spend all the time in the world sitting back and strategizing and researching and planning. But part of this journey, one of the most important lessons I've learned is that oftentimes the best route is just to take action, get feedback, make mistakes, and iterate. So here we are wrapping up the first episode of Life After Sales podcast with your hosts, Ding Zhang, the sales rapper. Today we covered some brief topics about the entrepreneurship journey, my story after sales. I didn't get into the full story because elements of that got deleted. So in the next episode, we're going to have Eric here, the Lowly SDR, owner of Above Ground Agency. Hit them up for your website, SEO, and video needs, optimized for B2B. And we'll dive deeper into that journey. But wanted to thank everyone, both the live listeners on Clubhouse, you at home listening on Spotify or the DSP of your choice, for tuning in, choosing Life After Sales. This podcast is not sponsored by anyone. I guess it would be sponsored by salesrap.io, the premier agency in B2B for account-based creative, top-of-funnel content creation, personal branding, and social selling. So hit your boy up if you're tired of boring ebooks, white paper, gated content, and webinars. Let's change the game. It's 2022. That Zoom call, it's not new anymore. So let's get some sales rap. Let's get some video skits, memes. What are those? Have you ever had an outreach message that was a jingle but also talked about your prospect? So yeah, and in 22, in this new year, making a strong commitment to be on YouTube more, make some more long form content. So here we are, very grateful for this audio setup and being a rapper for so long that this wasn't super painful, besides for some software issues with the video recording earlier. But hey, we make do and we overcome. And with that said, we are at 10 minutes on this last video. Appreciate you tuning in. It's been real. It's the Sales Rapper. I'll see you soon.